Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Trauma-Informed Practices Responding to Difficult Situations webinar. Firstly, just some housekeeping. If you want to ask a question, you can ask a question anytime throughout the presentation. Our lovely Tata here at NADA will be monitoring that box, and it's the Q&A box up at the top, at the bottom, down at the bottom. And you all are automatically on mute and cannot be seen. So we're kind of talking to the abyss at the moment, but thank you all for coming to this lovely webinar. I first would like to acknowledge country. So here at NADA, we're meeting on Gadigal land today. I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging and extend that respect to any Aboriginal people here with us today. This land was never ceded, always was, and always will be. Give an overview of why this webinar is happening. Prompt one, thanks, Michelle. So NADA has been approached to develop a resource for what happens during difficult situations and what is some guidance for people in the sector on what to do when it gets really pointy or a client is very escalated or very challenging. And I think a lot of people will think this resource will tell you what to do when that happens, and part of it will. But it really talks about trauma-informed practices, kind of overarching practices and day-to-day practices, that if you do all of this stuff, it's less likely that you end up there. But if you do end up there, here's some helpful hints on what you should do. It really embodies a trauma-informed lens. It's throughout the entire document. And NADA and my lovely panel really have a strong position on how we treat clients, how we work with clients, or how we work with people accessing our services really always needs to be trauma informed and encouraging people to use a universal layering of it. So just treat everybody like they may have experienced trauma. You're not going to hurt anybody if they haven't experienced a trauma. And it's really humane and dignified practices that we're going to talk about today. I would like to thank some people, a few shout outs. I would like to thank all the people with lived and living experience that contributed massively to this document, including Kevin, who's here with us today. We'll get to that. I'd like to thank all the NADA staff that contributed, but specifically Michelle Ridley. Michelle did a fantastic job and did most of the pulling together and the finding and the talking, and all the other people that contributed to this resource. It couldn't have been done alone. And now I would like to, I probably should have done this first. My name's Sarah Eder, and I'm the clinical director here at NADA. This is my lovely panel. Go over to you first, Michelle, to say your name and your role.
Okay, my name's Michelle. I work at NADA. I'm the clinical program manager. I've been here for about 4 or 5 years now. And prior to that, I've done lots of work across the community health sector, mainly in alcohol and other drugs, and worked in housing, domestic family violence, and here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That's a hard act to follow, but
Indeed, it is. Like I haven't got much to speak about myself, but my name is Levi. Well, my full name is Levi Griffiths, but I'm coming here today as a person with lived experience. I'm a Gamilaraay man from the Guambrai tribe, and sorry, I got it backwards there. Guambrai man from the Gamilaraay tribe. There we go. I've been testing that out all week and I got it wrong.
Because I don't talk about it yet.
Yeah, I know. I often talk about it, and then it's like I don't often introduce myself like that. You know what I mean? So like when I'm in a professional setting, completely different. But yeah, as I said, I'm coming from a lived experience person today, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Levi. Lucky last.
My name's Kevin Street. I'm a person with lived experience with intravenous drug use for several decades now. I'm a consumer engagement advocate. I hold positions with here in NADA's Consumer Engagement Committee, but I'm also a member of engagement committees and action groups with Uniting, specifically in the Medically Supervised Injection Centre, Kirkton Road Medical Centre here in King's Cross. I work at Newer in an NSP, and I'm also part of a fair treatment campaign which is being run by the Uniting Church. It's to deal with decriminalisation of personal possession of all drugs. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Wow, what a lovely panel we've got here. To work on your intro. You don't have much more to say. I think I'm selling yourself, but we'll just know that. I might go to you first, Michelle, and ask, how did this resource come about? How was it identified that there was a need for this resource in the sector?
Well, NADA often gets asked to do training around de-escalation and managing people who present challenging or with concerning behaviours. And then we started to, I suppose, after or during, and it's still going, COVID. Yes, it's still going. Sorry. I sit on a lot of cross-sector agency panels and meetings, and other service providers. People were talking about really having challenges around people being really distressed, and particularly around when it was the COVID lockdowns, and also when there was the vaccine mandates, and people were presenting really distressed to services. Service providers had to, weren't able to let people into services. So people were really talking about the need for a resource and support around how to respond to that. And so I think it's, as we talk about in the resource, this is just really a practice guide. It's online. It's got heaps of links so people can go to lots of other information. It is only a guide, and it's not intended to cover all the facets of trauma-informed care, but it's really, I suppose, in essence, is around learning the understanding of trauma and how that impacts people, what a difficult situation is. It talks about language and the importance of language, really the importance of cross-sector collaboration, which is a huge thing. And that's also in regards to the resource, part of that is been doing events and forums across the state. We've already done 2, one in Sydney, one in Nowra, and we've got more coming up in Ballina, Wagga, Newcastle, another one in Sydney. So I think the main thing about that is to get people together cross-sector, because what all the research says is we can't do it alone. So is a really important part of the guide and the forum.
Right. Sounds like a lot of work went into that one.
Yeah.
Can you tell us briefly, just take us through how you kind of embarked on this project and pulled this resource together?
So it was really through, I think, a lot of consultation with people with lived and living experience, and talked a lot to our NADA consumer advisory group. The guide has quotes and feedback from people with lived experience throughout it. There's some amazing, like a whole section of advice from people with lived experience of accessing community and health organisations. We also obviously did like a literature review, which the AOD Library New South Wales Health were really good with. We consulted with practitioners, NADA Practice Leadership Group, and there were lots of people that provided really valuable feedback to that. Shout out to Wendy from Curtin Road, provided some amazing advice. And yeah, so it's lots of people, but really I think the main and really important thing is the people with lived experience provided that advice and guidance.
Yeah, and there's quotes from people with lived and living experience all throughout the resource, and NADA really tries to use its position to center the voices of people with lived and living experience and acknowledge that we cannot do this work without them. Just to kind of backtrack a little bit, so I won't give you all a full presentation. You'll have to attend the workshops to get that juice. I don't know why it's called juice. But I think overall people don't think or realize how high the rates of trauma are in the general population. So it's over 63% of Australians have experienced some type of trauma, often many traumas. So there's kind of 3 understandings of trauma. There's a one-off trauma incident. There's complex trauma, which is trauma that's, you've been repeatedly exposed to, and there's intergenerational trauma. I don't know if I'm talking to now, I'm just looking at everyone.
Yeah.
And the stolen generation is really the best example of intergenerational trauma and the impacts and the long-lasting and continued impacts that has on Aboriginal communities. So then if you look at the people that are accessing drug and alcohol services, those rates of trauma go up even further. And when somebody experiences or has experienced a trauma, it really has significant biophysical impacts on your brain. And often people who have experience of trauma or history of trauma they might be easier to anger, or they might feel more anxious, or sometimes it goes the other way. They become very depressed. And that's when people start talking about, being treatment resistant. I love that term. Who made that one up? That's horrible. Or they need to talk more at groups. So I think we need to understand the context in which people who are accessing drug and alcohol services are coming to us with. And if we thought about their story and what happened to them, even on that day, and what it took for them to come and even put their hand up for help, which can often be a shaming experience for our people. And we considered that from the outset, and how that type of understanding and framing of these people can change the work that we do. Often when somebody comes and presents distress, do you think you're in a difficult situation? In my experience, and I've been in the drug and alcohol sector for over 10 years, sitting across residential, non-residential, community, non-government and government. Was that enough?
Yep,
I did.
that's
Yeah.
good.
Michelle gave me strict instructions before. Is if you just look at the person and understand what it took from them, and if you have a genuine deep appreciation, that it can change so much. Now I've set this question up for you, Kevin. I'm coming to you. As someone with lived experience of accessing services and now working as a peer worker, what do you see as most important for workers to know in regards to trauma-informed care when working with someone who presents to the service distressed or anxious or agitated? That's a big one.
It is a big one, isn't it? Well, look, it's a bit of background. I'm a person with lived experience with intravenous drug use, and I have sat in stage 3 of the medical supervised injection centre at times, and I've just sat there and sort of people watched, and I've looked around, and I've just gone, I was locked up with him in child welfare, I was locked up with him, I was locked up with him, I know her, she was locked up, but not with me, of course, and just, in a room full of 10 people, at least 8 of those people have been through the institutional situations that I went through as a child, and we are now sort of getting some exposure about what went on in those child welfare institutions. They were a sort of pedophile factory. We were physically and sexually mistreated along the way, and that trauma, I now know, led to my using heroin, my daily use of opiates, and it was a form of medication for me. So I now understand that that's what I was going through. So it must be very similar situation to other people that are in that room. I'm trying to, what am I trying to say here? People who are presenting in a situation where they've been a long-term drug user will have a traumatic background, because if they've been using for like 3 decades that I was, is what's behind that? You don't wake up one day as a child and go, I think for the next 30 years I might inject heroin 2-3 times a day. There's a reason for that, and I just think when people turn up seeking help, as Sarah said, it's a hard thing to do, and it's a situation where bravery should be recognised. If someone walks in and says, "I'd like some help," first thing is attend to the person there and then. Don't make an appointment from next week. So to try and deal with them there and then on the spot. And if you have to make an appointment for 2 weeks' time, that's fine. But at least engage with them on the spot. Do not judge if they're in a bad mood. They might be frightened. They might have had a run-in with the police on the way there. They might have just been told they're homeless. There's many number of reasons why people turn up presenting with could be perceived as an attitude problem by some people. But don't judge. Don't try and fix something that you definitely can't fix. Just I think the best words to use is, how can I help you today? And that will bring the temperature down quite a bit, because someone will go, oh, here's someone who's finally on my side. I don't feel like I'm having a constant battle. There's battles in life, you rent, you get Centrelink, shopping, there's battles every aspect of your life. And when someone says, how can I help you now? It as I said, it lowers the temperature. It puts people in a comfortable place, and it enables a conversation, a free exchange of information to be going on there. I think yeah. Sorry if I wasn't quite clear there.
No, I think.
No, I thought it was absolutely great. It reminded me of the quote that I often use in my work, that the hardest people to love are the ones that need it the most. And I would encourage everybody, and myself, I can remember when I've been particularly hard to love and how much I needed people to still love me, and to really to apply that real humanness to people who are presenting and may be stressed or angry or anxious, and we all communicate in different ways. I'm coming for you now. I moderated a panel with more people before I. In your experience,
No, go, please ask the question.
in your experience, what do you see as helpful in regards to trauma-informed care when working with someone who presents, as we're talking, distressed, agitated, anxious, elevated? Love that. That's another fun one.
Well, Kevin hit the nail on the head with a lot of stuff around that. It's definitely, in my own experience, it's like, how is the child going to say, I'm going to drink alcohol and I'm going to use drugs for the rest of my life, or for a long part of my life, when it's a 5-year-old going, why is all this stuff happening? Why am I getting yelled at? Why am I getting physically abused? Why is this all happening? What have I done? And it becomes like, the whole self about that person, It's like, what did I do wrong for someone else to tell me that, and then speaking about quotes, I immediately thought, hurt people hurt people.
Love that one too.
Yeah. As soon as someone is hurt, it's like, I want to inflict damage. It's like, but then when someone's hurt, like deliberately going out of their way to hurt someone, I reflect and look at it myself and go, okay, maybe this person's hurt. And they're trying to inflict damage on me. No matter what, it's not going to hurt because they're the ones going through that pain. It's like, how can I help you go through and get over that pain, instead of them going, oh, I'm going to self-medicate and just use drugs and put myself to sleep or whatever. Like, I'm happy to overdose and wake up in a hospital. How hard is that for someone to go through that? So it's difficult. It's like, for me as a person with lived experience, it's like, immediately when someone asks me like, what's wrong, what can I do, how can I help, it stops it just de-escalates immediately. It's like, you're the first person in how long has asked me, what can you do to help me, when I've been told no everywhere, or it's like, there's a wrong door, or you got to go down the road for that. Like, it's like, well, where's this help? And it gets to the point where I've asked for help so much, I've been told no so many times. I'm not going to ask because I'm only going to get told no.
And maybe you have to come and see this service because parole told you.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you don't even have any autonomy in this, and you're coming because you're being coerced. We can argue the toss about that later. And I really like what you said before about, like, thinking about how can I help you through your pain? Like, that immediate acknowledgement, and that's just like, I felt seen and I wasn't even doing it. So I really appreciate that philosophy and that approach. Do you think there's further considerations for this panel and for all the people out there to know or really be thinking about, because this doesn't talk about priority populations specifically, because it's only a start and we're on it, but for Aboriginal people and how that might really be meaningful to access this type of work when working in the community?
Yeah, it's been a question that's been asked for a long time, and the answer is, we'll never 100% finish, like, completely get rid of trauma, you know what I mean? And it's like, when we talk intergenerational trauma, a traumatic experience that myself that I could be going through, a great grandparent could have went through, but it's that whole trauma. I don't know if many people will look. The question I'll ask is, do you know what it's like to sleep with your shoes on? And what do you mean? No, knowing that you have a packed bag and you've got to get up and run. Not knowing when the next meal is, you know what I mean? And that sort of sends off like the trauma of the stress of, parents, and it gets transferred over to kids and all that sort of stuff. And that's just in the household growing up. But then when we leave the house, it's like, why is it that, in 50, 40 years ago, well, I'm 33. So for me, when I was growing up in school, it's like, because of the color of my skin, it was like, I got, verbally abused. And I'm like, well, the only time anyone showed any praise is when we played sport with everyone. It's like, oh, you've done great. Then the next day it's like, I was hated. Oh, that was just like a few experiences, you know what I mean? But like, coming from, like, for me as an Aboriginal man, it's like, what services are out there to help when I've been turned away from every other service? You know, where can I find somewhere that's like is wanting to help me, is gonna ask me and then asking me how to help, how can they help? It's difficult. It's a very difficult question, and it's a tough one, but I guess someone who's been around in the sector as well long enough to say that always never assume someone knows where they're from, never assume that someone knows who their family are. There's a lot of different things. Stolen generation today, I believe, still happens when kids are a ward of the state when they were born, when they take their first breath. That was not even that long ago. Education around in First Nations and social justice. I am currently doing university, and then like I did a subject on that, and everyone in my class was like, you know, why aren't we learning this in primary school? Why are we learning this so late night? Early intervention.
There's nothing of that when I was a child.
Yeah.
Nothing. My experience of First Nations people when I was going through primary school was that Cook walked in, put the flag down, and everybody said welcome, you know, and I was taught that for most of my time as a child, and it's only when I hit the child welfare institutions and prisons that I actually saw what was happening to First Nations people. You know, I saw the way they were being treated and the way they were being locked up for ridiculous little things, and you know, things that I would have gotten a bond for or a fine or something. Other people were getting 6 months, and I saw the treatment and the way they were being segregated within the population and stuff.
And the rights in which Aboriginal people are incarcerated. We were talking about that before.
Yeah.
I also think, like you said, Kevin, you might just get a slap on the wrist, where an Aboriginal person would be properly charged and jailed for something. That also limits their access to some drug and alcohol treatment, because they go, oh no, you've got a really long criminal history. But really, if you unpacked it, the offense wasn't that big that it should ever mean that you don't get to go to residential treatment. And the real-time effects, I think, are still alive and play out to this day, frustratingly. Yeah. Do we want to take an impromptu question from somebody in the audience?
Do we have some?
We have one.
Yep.
Yes, we'll take it.
Actually,
We'll take it.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
It says, hi guys, really appreciate the experiences you've spoken about and the advice. Thank you for sharing. You're very welcome. I was wondering if you have a thought or two on how to recognize trauma in people and broach the topic. Even if the person seems traumatized, they may not know it because the frog put in cold water and brought to the boil slowly doesn't jump out. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to answer that one. Who wants to have the first crack?
It's going to take time. I remember when I first started counselling around my sort of alcohol and other drug use and my suicidal ideation way back in the beginning of this millennium, actually. Background, I went on to an interferon ribavirin program to rid myself of Hep C, and it really sort of mucked around with the sort of whole cognitive thinking and stuff, and there was some suicide ideation. I put my hand up because I realised I needed help, and I went into counselling. And I remember going into my first counselling session, and I sat there, and I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know whether I had to say anything. And luckily, I had a really good counsellor who just sat there and let things progress at my pace. You know. Of course, she asked questions, you know, why do you think you're here? Just sort of questions that were not hard to answer, but were leading, that would have sort of helped me sort of come out of my shell, so to speak. All my life, I have had to hide things. I've had to hide the fact that I was sexually abused as a child. I had to hide the fact that I was an intravenous drug user. I had to hide the fact that I had a criminal record and stuff. And it was just never enabled me to be honest with anybody. And with that dishonesty, it caused me to actually shut down and not enable people to get through the barrier. I used to put up beautiful big brick walls around myself, and I thought they were actually protecting me, but it was actually was walling me off from the rest of the world. And I now know that today, but at the time I thought I was protecting Kev. I thought Kev was looking after Kev, but Kev was actually isolating Kev, and it wasn't a good place to be.
Mm.
And I was going to say too, in the resource and the guide, it talks about like the main parts of trauma-informed care, and I think too is what Kevin was saying. It's just really important to be guided by the person in regards to if someone presents to a service and is agitated or distressed. It's kind of just helping them or giving that friendly face of what they want at that time too. You don't necessarily have to unpack the trauma if someone's coming in to, to access, they want some referrals for housing, or they want, it's really guided by that, what that person wants at that time, I think. And even with counselling, asking, like Kevin said, like, what's your idea of why you're here today or whatever. But I think it's really important to be guided by the person and not try and have a real, get into something that someone may not just be ready for. But I think it's that really solution focused and really strength based.
And I think the panel that you were on before, Levi, with Laura from Guthrie House, she really spoke a lot about leading with curiosity and how that really informs their practice, and that can change the experience for those women that access that service. And I don't think we need to know all the deep and meaningfuls and context. We need to lead with love. Love and compassion is the way. Speaking of love and compassion, how good was that? So I hope that we answered the question properly.
Yeah.
If anybody else has any questions, please feel free to send them through.
And we'll give our email details after, so you're always welcome to email, and we have the forums in person if you can attend. So
Amazing forum.
yeah,
Somebody has a question.
Levi was on the panel for the forum last week. So yes.
It was greatly run.
Yes.
It was mad.
We might just do this one about language, and it might touch on this question that just come through, and then we'll come back to answer that one. So we've gotten it. I think, and we've kind of touched on it throughout this whole discussion, but the power of language, the importance of language. Hold up, I think.
And you on.
Nua and Nada collaborated and has done a Language Matters guide. And it talks about some language that's commonly used, but after extensive consultation with the sector and people with living experience, it gives the correct ways to talk, the ways that are most appropriate and not belittling for people accessing drug and alcohol services. It is in no way about being politically correct. It is about being caring and compassionate and seeing this person as an individual. I have a quote here. Is this your quote, Kevin?
Yep.
Thank you, Kevin.
Sorry. Sorry, because I don't think I know, because I wrote the resource. I added it to the resource, but it's Kevin's quote. Sorry, Kevin.
That's all right.
It says, mind your language. How you speak and the words used can perpetuate stigma. None of us are perfect, and we will make mistakes with our language, but we can learn from them. Can you tell us a bit more about that and the power of language, and why do you think it's so important?
With language, we attach labels to people. We attach labels like non-compliant if they miss a couple of days that they're dosing for buprenorphine or methadone or something. We label them intravenous drug users. If you turn up at an emergency department and you expose yourself to the next IV drug user, and then those sort of other things can perpetuate. The words like junkie get thrown around. Drug user, drug seeking behaviour and stuff, and just language just perpetuates labels, and labels keep people in place, and labels carry stigma, but the person can actually self-stigmatize. And I know that sounds funny, but it's a thing that I'm sort of getting a greater understanding of now. For a long while there, I thrived under the banner of being called a junkie, because I thought it was dark and it was edgy, and I used it as a way of identifying in a particular group of people and stuff. And And I now know that by my calling myself a junkie, that I was just perpetuating that whole sort of process of putting myself down when I thought I was so bloody cool. It was just ridiculous. But you know, like language is important. Remember that little ditty from a child, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me. How bloody wrong is that? You know, names and stuff, name calling and stuff, and adding labels to people and stuff really can stigmatize the person. It can hold the person back. It can make that person shut down and withdraw, and that's just dangerous. It's just danger. It's just breach of danger to me. And I said, you know, like none of us are perfect. And I'm the least politically correct person when it comes to language. And I do mind my P's and Q's when I'm talking to people, and I also try to think how I'd like to be addressed and how I'd like to be spoken to, and I use that when I talk to other people, and it's just something that we really should be thinking about all the time. You know, just the way we address people, the language we use, and how it can perpetuate stigma, how it can make someone feel good or bad. You know, how it can get someone to open up or get someone to close down. You know.
And I think I was going to say in the resource, we talk about different ways of, you know, describing or talking about someone, like if they present with a challenge instead of like their experience a challenge or something, you know, instead of like saying that they're challenging, or instead of aggression or aggressive, like heightened emotional state or distressed. And it may be that the person hasn't got challenging behaviors. It might be just that as a worker, you might, you know, just find them challenging to work because it's something about you. I think it's really looking at and doing that reflection around how, you know, often not internalizing people's if someone accessing a service is upset and they tell you to piss off or whatever. I promise I wasn't going to I can swear a bit. But if they tell you that, it's not about you, it's talking about, you know, and not taking like, you won't talk to me like that, or just saying, oh, it sounds like you're really upset, you might have had a hard day, why don't we just take some time out, do you want to go and get a cup of tea or whatever it is, but trying to, you know, relook at how the language that we use, I think, is so important.
And that segues us into this next. We've got 2 more questions from the audience. Say thank you, everyone.
We're doing well.
We are doing well. We're going to do the first one. I'm interested in your thoughts on how to set respectful boundaries in helping therapeutic relationships. Trauma in all forms is not a free pass to treat people poorly or be disrespectful. What advice do you have for professionals assisting with people with trauma to instill boundaries and set expectations, and do this without negatively impacting the relationship, especially before rapport has been built?
I just wanted to think, you know, some people, I think one of the notes in this in the guide says it's important to note this resource is not suggesting that people who are accessing services, there won't be people who are aggressive or violent, but it's a really very small proportion of people, and it's overwhelmingly the majority of people aren't aggressive or violent. And I think it's really important to note that we're not saying that, you know, there may be someone, but I think people who, particularly people who use drugs or people who have mental health issues, get this stereotype in the media or whatever that they're aggressive or they're more likely to be aggressive. When this resource was being developed, you know, workers in other sectors were saying to me, oh, Michelle, how would you respond to this? Because I was working in alcohol and other drugs. And I was kind of like, well, people with alcohol and other drug use issues aren't more violent than other people. So I think in regards to, I get, you know, and I totally respect what you're saying, but I also think too, it's around just always being really respectful in those therapeutic relationships. But I think being really mindful that the majority of people who are accessing services won't be aggressive or violent.
And I think trauma-informed care isn't a free-for-all to behave however you want.
Yeah.
Part of trauma-informed care is to have a really predictable environment So if you do this, this is what's going to happen. So we're all very clear on what our boundaries and parameters are. That's actually safer for the clients. It doesn't mean that if somebody's, having a really difficult time in the waiting room, that you just kind of let it go. But it does mean that they know that in this environment, staff are going to respond in this kind of way. That's going to always be respectful and compassionate, but it will be safe for everyone. So it's definitely not a free for all. And I'm mindful about being worried about that, because I think if we spend more time trying to be trauma informed, we'd have less energy for that stuff.
And I think it's setting, like Sarah said, the boundaries up at the start, and at the start of every session or every group. Okay, how will I know today, if you're starting to feel distressed or if you're starting to feel upset? Even if you say, like, if you're doing a group session, you do that at every group, because people, group rules, or just like, how will you be able to tell me if I'm feeling upset? How will I know, do we need to take a break? I think it's just having those, just really kind of being clear.
Do you two want to add anything to that? Because I have a question directly for you two.
Okay, I'll give some
shout out.
Yeah.
So I always give suggestions, never advice. I need to say, but the way that I look at it is like, for me myself, it's like my own approach. Am I approachable? Do I look closed up? Everyone's experienced different types of traumas in all different circumstances, so I'm never going to pinpoint exactly. So boundaries, not to go, look, I'm the worker, you're the client, this is that. So it's about how I deliver a message. If I'm going to deliver a message that's open, that's kind, and then someone actually feels heard, I'm going to get a better response from them, and they're more than likely to even just answer one question. And always remember, silence is okay. For me, I'm a big follower, like off on my arms, and that's not because I'm closed. It's because I'm resting my arms on my gut, and I'm comfortable.
Comfortable.
I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
So like, don't always. Oh, okay. It's not always being closed, and it's not always like I'm not going to answer anything. I'm comfortable. I'm silent. I leave long pauses because silence is okay. Processing. But yeah, it can be difficult, but I always ask myself, how better can I improve to help people? It's like, what am I doing that makes them feel distant, or I'm all blocked off, I've got a wall up or anything. So like, just try to be, for me, as open as I possibly can for clients accessing the service, so they know it is a safe space.
Did you want to add anything on that topic, Kevin? Did you want me to?
It was one of the most difficult questions I've ever asked. I did an article some years ago, pre-COVID. It was for the weekend at the two of us, and it was myself as a consumer of services at the Medical Supervised Injection Centre, and my relationship, my professional relationship with Dr. Mary Ann Chauncey, who runs the thing. And it was the hardest question I've ever been asked. What is your relationship to Mary Ann? And I just had to describe the way that Mary Ann can actually personalise the professional. I think that was the quote I gave. And
I love that.
look,
Yeah,
I think boundaries are really important. But also, they're a parameter that sort of sets the scene of everything. And I think making someone feel comfortable and safe in that situation, and just asking questions, even like sitting in a counselling room, simple question: do you mind if I shut the door, or would you like the door open? Am I sitting too close to you? Where would you like to sit? Like, if I'm going into a situation where I'm entering a room with someone, I will stand until they take their space where they're going to sit. So then I know I can make a bit of a judgment on where I put my body within that room and stuff. And I always leave the door open, and hopefully someone's comfortable enough to say, "Oh, can we shut the door? I want to talk about personal things and stuff." It's just things like that. Look, boundaries are important. Boundaries will protect yourself, and client's the wrong word. The other person.
People.
People.
Yeah. Just have a comment from Kylie, who I think I haven't read it all, but I think Kylie's agreeing with the panel and saying, if a client is disrespectful or unhelpful behaviors, having a respectful, honest space for the person to come back the next day, next
Yeah.
week, to talk through the behavior. They have the opportunity to be vulnerable, maybe a new behavior, and learn healthy relationships and boundaries. And you get a thumbs up from this panel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give us a thumbs up, everybody.
Thank God.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as we,
Judgmental.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think as we said before, all of us have bad days, and all of us, you know, if you were talking about, if you're waiting in the doctor's surgery for hours and you know, no one's coming out to tell you that, you know, your appointment's an hour late or whatever, like, I mean, I get really annoyed. So I think it's about just putting yourself in other people's shoes and just ensuring, like, if someone has to wait to see you, going out and checking on them and just saying, look, I'm really sorry, I'm running a bit late, you know, not you know, having those kind of, just, I think it's just all like about respect and how you would want to be treated. And yeah.
We've got one specifically for you, Kevin and Levi. To Kevin and Levi, what, if anything, do you think would have helped you earlier on in the piece to navigate your way through services and support networks?
Ooh.
Good question out there in the
To
audience.
be, I think the most important thing that in my journey was I was not believed as a child when I said I was being abused, and that set the parameters for the rest of my life. And, you know, I thought, if no one's going to believe me when I say that, what chance do I have? You know, like and it just caused me to shut down. It caused me to run away from situations. It caused me to have a very aggressive persona as a young child. You know, I was sitting here thinking about some of the things I did as a child. I'm sitting here quietly cringing at some of my behaviours as a youngster. You know, and that was, even though it was sort of decades ago. But yeah, I think that the fact that I was not believed when I finally opened up and said, this is happening to me, and it was just dismissed. I don't know why it was dismissed, whether I was dismissed because I was being disbelieved, or I was just a kid trying to get an adult into trouble, or because the person who I'd actually exposed this to didn't know how to handle it. I don't know what the situation was at the time, but I know I wasn't believed and nothing happened, and that led down a different path. Yeah.
Definitely, and I think,
who knows, if I was believed as a child, I could have been a Prime Minister of Australia now. You never know.
The way that we work with our people have long-lasting effects, and the amount of impact that one person could have had on your life, if they just believed you. I think often when we're in this work, we can forget how profound our contributions or our influence can be. Levi, did you have?
Yeah, I do have a comment on that. That's all. Like, thanks for sharing that, Kevin. Like, when you said that, I immediately thought of a term. I remember it because it was said, children are meant to be seen and not heard. Yeah, and that digs deep, you know. And immediately I go to my own child. Like, I think I would never say that to her, because if I want her to be able to tell me anything that she wants and be open and honest, and I would believe her. What, growing up not being heard, not being listened to, not being say anything, not be believed. And it's like, I'm just going to say whatever. I'm going to be the loudest person, and everyone's going to hear. I'm going to come and I'm going to bring the house down. You know, and that's thinking about some of the stuff I go to. So off that. But yeah, as an adult. So to answer the question in the most simplest form that I believe I can, all I needed was someone to listen to what I had to say and believe me when I said it. Because it took me a long time to sort my own affairs out, and it did. I still remember the day that I reached out to a friend, and so it's a great story. I reached out. I said I needed help. He said, righto. Well, he bought me a train ticket the next day, but then still picked me up that day that he bought the train ticket. I'm like, I may not have got on that train, and that was the day that I got on the straight and narrow. So that for me was like, it took one person. That's all it took. One person to just hear what I had to say. If someone did that earlier, maybe different story. Could have done anything. The world is your oyster.
Definitely.
I do have one other comment too with that. the way that I can, if I can reflect as a child, like children are like a piece of paper. What you put on that piece of paper becomes. Children are sponges. Children are only born with I believe, the fear of loud noises and falling. Everything else is learned. Learned behavior, learned traumas. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
No, it's so powerful and
Yeah,
it's so true. We have time for one more question. Thank you all for your thoughts and insights so far. We're doing well. I love a compliment. I won't go on the compliment.
No,
thing
no,
again.
you'll have to come to the events to see more.
I'm wondering, in terms of practical steps or ways to help clients after the difficult event, does the resource talk to psychoeducation you can give to clients, i.e. polyvagal theory, as you mentioned, Sarah? Thanks for the specific plug. The psychological impacts of trauma on our body and our nervous system. So it wouldn't go into that level of detail. This resource is really a start, and could be much bigger and broader, but I would encourage you to continue doing training and going to, 2-day workshops on trauma-informed care. And there's heaps of research out there on trauma and readily available.
And I think in the resource we do it a link to just a really easy video that around how trauma impacts the brain. I think that's a really useful, like, to go through with someone that you're working with, or just so that they have an understanding of how it impacts.
Yeah, and that's linked in the resource, so you're able to get that. We've got 2 more. We're very this is from Lance. Many years ago, I entered a rehab and had to share a room with another man after my jail experience. I couldn't do this and feel safe, so I slept in the library. I was eventually discharged non-compliant. Many rehabs still have processes which are re-traumatizing, and they are accountable. Yeah, I don't think everybody gets it right at the moment, and I think that's why this resource is so needed. But does anybody have a reflection or comment on that?
Totally get it. Don't want to sleep in there. Definitely 2 outs. A lot of places are now reducing numbers and making them 1 out to program in rehabs, which is definitely more comfortable and how people would definitely feel. That experience is tough, it's like, just because like that you've been labeled non-compliant, and then it's like, why? And they didn't ask the question as why is it you sleeping here? Is everything okay? That's all they had. Like, that's just my thinking on that, is why wasn't a question asked to why are you sleeping in there? It's not like, oh, you're just sleeping in here. Why are you not complying with our rules? We've been breaking the rules since we came out of the womb. That's why we ended up in prison. Oh, sorry, I didn't end up in prison. I've never done a lagging, but I ended up in handcuffs a few times. So I totally get it. It's like we break the rules, but that is like just asking the question, what's going on with you?
Curiosity stuff.
Yeah, curiosity.
Be curious about people.
Yeah.
And I think too, having worked at NADA for a few years now, and also have had mates in and out of rehab, and I think rehabs are really, residential rehabs have really improved over recent years, and I think particularly now they're really more client-centered. I mean, not saying they weren't before, but I think now too. And if things like that happen in a rehab, or you've got you're working with someone, I'd always ask to talk to a manager or talk to someone that you could that if, so say you're now a worker and supporting someone, or a family member. But I mean, I do think things are changing and have changed, and I'm forever optimistic. And Sarah worked in residential rehab.
And I could also appreciate, sometimes it's just not the ability from the organization for funding reasons, is funding constraints. You can't have 1 out for everybody. But that's when we get curious and clever. And I do think that the sector has come a long way. And reach out, advocate. I think, when you approach other organizations, with the intention to have the best outcome for the client, it's my experience that most people in the sector respond quite well to that. I think I already said this before, but I'm going to say it again. This is our last question. I think I said that 4 questions. Yeah, I think I did, didn't I, Kevin? This is from Christina. What is the best way to encourage colleagues who don't have a lot of AOD experience to see AOD through who see AOD through a disease model, not a moral model, especially when kids are involved.
I don't agree with the disease model with around addiction.
I think I read it
Yeah,
wrong.
no, it's to encourage colleagues who don't have a lot of AOD and they see it through. I think too, talking to people with lived experience and then, and reaching out and, there's lots of good services like, information stuff. But I think really too, talking about to people with lived experience and accessing education and kind of,
You go to a workshop. Yeah, a few next year.
yeah, we've got a few next year. Tell your colleagues to go along.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you think?
Attend things like the NADA conference. Attend things like the newer PAC forum.
Yes, yeah.
Contact Uniting and try and get
Sure.
some tours of the Uniting's medically supervised injection centre. You won't get a tour while the centre's actually open and being used as an injection centre. It'll be out of hours tour. But most of those, 9 out of 10 times in those tours, you will meet someone from their consumer action group who was actually a current, either a former or a current client of the centre, and you'll get to talk to real life drug users. There's just lots of ways. Conferences. Newer is a good resource to be contacting.
Strong clinical supervision and internal
Yeah.
policies and matching philosophies, I think is really helpful.
But I definitely think the lived experience, and also I'm not sure if the person's a NADA member, we do lots of workshops and lots of training, but also around linking in with your local services, if you're reaching out to your local drug and alcohol agency to do some in-house services, and I think that's really important. Because people too, as we're talking about before, drug use is really stigmatized and it's still criminal, like a criminal matter. So people, often believe what they see in the media or they, get whatever. And so I think it's really trying to be understanding of that person too, because if they think that you get really kind of preachy and start to think, no, we'll probably shut down. Most people shut down if you, I think, just asking them why they think that or what's their belief, and then I think that a lot of people have a lot of stereotypes or misconception ideas or whatever.
I think time.
Yeah,
They're new to the sector.
Yeah,
let's educate them.
Yeah,
that's what we do. Well, panel, I'm going to thank you all each individually and ask if you had one thing you wanted to leave on the table for our peeps out there. Kevin, thank you so much for your contribution ongoingly with NADA and today specifically.
Thank you.
Do you have anything you want to leave on the table for everyone? A little nugget, if you will.
It's a good resource. That's what I want to say. Pick it up, read it. Look at it and use it as a guide to best practice, basically.
Thanks so much, Kevin. You've been absolutely fantastic today. Levi, thank you for your ongoing contribution to NADA and specifically today. Is there anything that you want to leave the peeps with?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask a question. I always say, when people say to me, oh, I've got a silly question or whatever, it's like the only silly question is the question that's not asked. Because how are you going to know an answer? How are you going to find direction? To follow up helping a colleague who doesn't have much experience, ask questions, help them with answers. Interagency meetings, the NADA conference, which I'm excited for, I can't wait. Collaboration, working together. It's like the best way to work is working together.
Fantastic.
A problem shared is a problem halved.
How do I follow these 5 minutes? Okay.
Sorry,
Tata.
Subtle.
Oh, okay.
You'll say it.
Sorry. Those who know us online will get it.
Well, someone asked how the resource can be accessed. So this is live on the NADA website under resources.
And all our resources online are free, and we have other webinars for other resources. So please, access it.
Michelle, thank you very much for your ongoing support to NADA, even though we pay you to do it. And for your contribution today.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to leave with the team out there?
Gee, I don't know how I can follow Kevin and Levi. I think just obviously what they've said, but but I think just treating people how you'd want to be treated. Doesn't matter what your background, how many letters you got after your name, what you've done, whatever your qualifications, everyone can, can treat people with love and compassion and respect. And I think, just being really mindful of that, and just, if someone needs a bit of a break to, just get a few breaths and then, come back to your service. I think, that's okay. And yeah, I think that's my
Thanks, Michelle.
part.
Thanks to everyone out there that has said thank you. Hi, Libby. It's me. We haven't finally met. We finally kind of did meet. Not really. You've met me. Okay, do the conference.
Okay, and we want to put a plug out for the NADA conference. And so it's creating safe spaces on the 11th and 12th of May at the International Convention Centre, ICC, we'll say that. So we really encourage people to put abstracts in. They close on the 20th of January. It's and I'm not just saying this because I work at NADA, it is a really good conference. And I'd really encourage anyone to put in an abstract. We really encourage people with lived experience, peer workers, academic, anyone to put in an abstract. And we've already got some really good keynote speakers, including Vicky Reynolds from Canada, who really talks a lot about the impacts around working in a sector that's really kind of under-resourced, and that can impact on people's well-being. And so she kind of does a different lens on self-care and well-being. So yeah, it should be really good. And any more plug for the conference?
Come to the conference. We say so.
And we do have we have scholarships for smaller organisations. They need to be NADA members, but we also have 5 or so scholarships. Sorry, I couldn't do the word. Scholarships for consumers and lived experience people. So please, yeah.
We've obviously come to the end of the hour because Michelle's struggling. Just highlighted you there. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for participating. And please feel free to reach out to myself or Michelle if you have any questions or concerns, if we can link you with each other. Bye. Bye.